cutting to the point here, are you familiar with Senator Crapo and some of his comments and questions to Chairman
Yes.
Gensler? Okay, I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Which specific line of questioning?
Well, I believe Senator Crapo used his entire 5 minutes, and I have
I saw
a
the.
link to the
Go
video,
ahead.
and I'll
Yeah.
share it with you. And I'll share it with you. But basically, all 5 minutes was specific to a situation
Like the
occurring
MMTLP.
with a stock ticker.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So I watched
Yes,
all
sir.
of that. Yeah, I was very interested in that because it came up during the space last week, and I watched Chair Gensler really kind of struggle through those answers. Um, so I've done a little homework. I can't say I know enough about this whole situation to really appreciate what's going on. It's obviously that FINRA halted this stock, but they still allowed it to trade kind of by appointment because you know after their trading suspension, they didn't halt it 100%. You could still do some trading, and I think it's a very confusing situation for FINRA and for the DTC when you look at what do you do when there's a reissuance of shares. And I think, you know, that Chair Gensler should have said, this is how I would have answered it if I were Chair Gensler. I would say, yes, I'm familiar with the situation. There apparently are a lot of people who believe there's some kind of naked shorting issue, or there's other kinds of nefarious conduct going on with respect to the manipulation of those shares. There's a big problem when there's a trading suspension. Oftentimes, trades a stock never trades again, or again trades very thinly on an unsolicited basis because under Rule 15C211, I'm very familiar with that part. That no one wants to quote or advertise the sale of that stock because you have certain due diligence responsibilities with respect to audited financial statements and other information. Essentially, you have to believe that the representations that company is making is true, and you're on notice that there might be problems. So, FINRA, the questions last week had to do with getting blue sheeting information from FINRA because maybe that information would be key. I think, the DTC is where the plumbing of Wall Street sort of happens. And if, if these shares were available for borrowing or um, the short positions have to be reconciled, there has to be transfer agent records. So I guess if I were Chair Gensler at the time, asked about this, I would have said, look, we have oversight responsibilities over FINRA, which he did say, I think, explained very clearly. There's a group, yeah,
Yes,
there's
he did. You're
right.
right.
So
He
there's
did.
a group in the inspection and examinations group that regulates FINRA and other self-regulatory organizations, and they can go in there and do an inspection or examination. And I think Chair Gensler was right to say, I can't comment if they're going in there. All I can say is this is their responsibility. And I think a group from that SEC examination section and FINRA, because FINRA will do whatever the SEC tells them to do. So I didn't like that part of his question where he's kind of like, oh, that's FINRA. That's not us. It's not true. I think FINRA will do anything the SEC tells them to do because the SEC has direct oversight of them. So if the SEC were to say to FINRA, look, you got to contact the DTC, you've got to figure this out and let us know exactly what's going on for all of these shareholders to try to figure it out. I don't know whether the company is legitimate or not. I haven't done any work relating to that, but I guess when I watched this, Steph,
Well,
that was my thoughts. Does that help?
yeah, and just for context and not to get into the weeds of it, but going back far enough just to give you this piece of information is that this is a ticker that was never supposed to be trading. It was actually
Right.
a preferred dividend that was issued out to shareholders of the original company before it merged, and it was called Torchlight, merged with MetaMaterials. But a point you bring up that I thought was interesting was the FINRA piece, and they will do what the SEC says, because I got confused with. I'm going to paraphrase where Gensler said, FINRA had consulted with us on X, but then we weren't consulted about the halt. And I had, again, I'm not a savvy investor. I'm pretty much a novice, but I thought for things like that, those things would have to go through the SEC as well. But I
Well,
don't know.
the SEC can
Um,
do trading suspensions and FINRA can do trading suspensions. So he was right about that. And FINRA did this trading suspension, but it wasn't 100%, again, because unsolicited trading could still happen. So, but that doesn't absolve
gotcha.
the SEC of their responsibility, which he mentioned, to conduct an examination. And they can call the FINRA people into, and I thought the congressman did a very good job of being polite about it. I think he was very clear, and hopefully the chair went back to their office. Chair Gensler went back to his office and said, "Look, where's the examination team? Can you go to FINRA and figure this out and let me know what's going on?" The problem is that he's kind of conflicted because you can't say all of this stuff that goes on with respect to these examinations is non-public. So he can't say,
Right.
here's what we found. We think the company is suspicious, but we're not allocating resources for enforcement because for whatever reasons, or we think we've referred it to FINRA enforcement, or we've referred it to a state regulator. There's not much he can say along those lines. And he kind of stuttered through that, which kind of surprised me, because he could have just said, look, I can't comment on examination findings. I can just tell you, which he did, that with respect to these actions, with respect to what's going on, the SEC, you can bet, is on it. We've got to figure this stuff out. And it's a bit of a quirky situation when you're talking about the DTC. If you don't get delivery of your shares, but you're owed a cash dividend, there's a process that makes sure that you get that cash dividend. But I think it's become, again, very confusing for FINRA and the DTC with respect to reissuance of shares. So I can appreciate that the situation for even Chair Gensler is a little confusing. That's the sort of the best I can do without knowing more facts.